Hello, everybody. My name is Brian.
This is BJR3.
And we are Comics Uncut. This is our second episode. In this episode, we'll be talking about what, BJR?
The scholarship and comics.
Okay, so we saw a couple weeks ago, and it's common, people, a while back ago, people would have to make their own degrees, but now they offer degrees. College has a way of, marketing itself extremely well to, pop culture things.
Exactly.
You gotta remember, colleges are always 100 years behind the cool shit. Mm-hmm. So they're just now getting into comics. Now the thing about it is that they're offering master programs and doctoral programs, I'm assuming.
Yeah, NYU.
Yep. So that being said, that's what this podcast is about. If you missed our first podcast, please go back and listen to it. That was about the blacks in comics. We're both African American, and we talk about that on the podcast.
Yep.
So you might enjoy it, you might not, whatever. Take it, leave it alone. Today, though, it's the scholarship, academia, the masters, the doctorates in comics
of comic books.
So, BJR, what are your thoughts about just them offering these programs?
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a program to either acclimate or to further people's knowledge within the realm of comic books, because comic books goes everywhere. I mean, it's lasted this long, and we have so many people that have not gotten their work known, or whatever you call it, have very well known work, but the common person or anything probably doesn't actually look at it the same way that a comic book person would. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, to vaunt it to such a status really sort of eliminates comic books in general, because comic books come from a place that isn't part of academia. Academia is something that pretty much covets knowledge. Mm-hmm. I've learned things from comic books from a very young age. That
when was the first time you got into comics?
I got into comic books around maybe 5 years old with just X-Men and Wolverine and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And basically I learned things and stuff even further from that and stuff in things in manga like Battle Angel Alita and stuff like mm-hmm. that. There's things that I have looked up from comic books mm-hmm. that have actually influenced me and everything from this point. There's free knowledge within comic books.
Right.
Coming from experience and stuff like that. Because the thing about it is, you're talking about something created from experience that conveys that experience. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about, comic books just having this connotation, to put it into whatever, to academia and stuff like that, is almost imperialistic in the sense mm-hmm. that you have a person putting their flag in the ground and saying, you can't speak on comic books and stuff because you don't have the knowledge of, let's say, Moby Dick and Plato or whatever the heck to gauge a comic book. But mm-hmm. comic books are made from these lower points, so-called lower points and everything of experience, and I just don't think that there should be a barrier to entry to that. Right.
And I second that. If you look at comics, you can look at Jewish creations, deriving out of humble beginnings, tenements, and, Superman, Cleveland, Ohio, Indeed. Farm Boys, you know what I mean? You guys like Bob Dylan. That's the Bob Dylan of comics.
Right.
So the thing about it is what you have to realize and recognize is that. Now, the thing about it is that academia may exploit this, actually. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is that we're not against this. The thing is that we're just saying be aware of this and recognize both aspects of it, because the duality and in the future, because the thing about it is what you got to recognize is if you look at Mouse, the reason part of its success exists is because it's mandatory in colleges. Mm-hmm. They have to read that in college.
Yeah.
And in high school. And in middle school. That is the standard now for learning the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. So the thing about it is you can look at that from a marketing perspective. You can look at that from a just a traditional comic as a success story. You know what I mean? There's so much you can pull from that. And academia will pull what it needs to from that as well, which is appropriate. But on the flip side,
it's money.
Yeah. Money. Now, I'm not against capitalism.
No.
you know, but recognize the ugly beast for what it is.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, don't try to paint it with fucking roses and make it into something it's not. You know, so the thing about it is that if these people are going to continue to do and like, well, start to exploit it, because if we look at academia, they're always 100 years late.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is that these cats, you know, will take it and run with it. And the thing is that they are the standard. Think about doctors. Think about psychologists, psychiatrists, any field of where they're an authority figure and they have a doctorate. You will listen to them by default because you trust them.
They're experts in their field.
So if you look at that, there's potential and there will be exploitation, and there'll be an authority of something that that's not in their fucking lane.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So with that being said, what is the goal that needs to happen? Should we appease this by trying to get our books in academia, in colleges, and this kind of thing? Like, so should you create books to cater to this? Because you could be an innovator on that aspect and exploit it and be financially rewarded by getting, you know, a $50,000, royalty check every year because all these college students had to buy it. You know what I mean? So what do you do at that point? So it's a strategy, it's the philosophy, it's the integrity. All that thing it comes into play. Now, if you look at Mouse, Spiegelman, he didn't have any intention of doing that. That started out with like some fucking critter comic with him and, you know, Robert Crumb and a few other guys, and then it just grew into something else. So, you know, with that being said, what is the goal?
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing is and stuff, like, I just think that in a large way, because, whatever you call it, of the standards of academia, I think that it's just, I don't know, I don't think that it's really possible and anything to do it and stuff. I mean, unless you're just talking, like, if you're talking about taking a class and learning about comic books and stuff like that, that's perfectly fine, you know, because you're talking about, whatever you call it, a person being introduced to a world that they, whatever you call it, they might not necessarily know and stuff, or furthering their knowledge, like I was saying before. But, like, when you're actually, like, putting, like, a standard, like, a stamp, like, oh, okay, like, you have a degree in comic books now, and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, yeah, right? But, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like, it becomes, like, it becomes completely different and stuff like that. Because the thing about it is and stuff, if you're talking about comic books being vaunted to that sort of level, you're talking about influencing the creativity of people and stuff like that. You're like you were saying, like, should a comic, or that's the conundrum that it creates. Should a comic artist or a writer, whatever the heck it happens to be and stuff like that, apply themselves to being scholastic and stuff like that, to being whatever you call academic and stuff like that, or should they just do what they want to do and everything as an artist would?
Right.
You know, and to me and stuff like that, it's lessening because you're talking about basically a person that's fitting within a parameter to whatever you call it, to do something that they should just be able to do naturally and stuff like that. If you enjoy a comic or whatever, or know comic books and stuff like that, you should be able to just do that, to be that, to be who you are. But instead, this actually works to lessen the power of an artist and stuff like that, because it's like, I'm not going to hire you from whatever the heck and everything because you don't have a degree in comic books and stuff. That doesn't make any sense. And the thing about it is and stuff like that, when we look at the history of comics, like Fletcher Hanks, I don't know who the fuck Fletcher Hanks is from the get-go and stuff like that. I only know that because Fantagraphics pulled him out of the grave and everything and put him in my hand. You know what I mean? Like, but he's outsider entirely. You know, like, I don't know who knew about him and everything before his, like, unearthing and stuff like that, you know? But, like, that person doesn't do comics in a standard way. But he did it because he was an artist. You know? He was allowed to and stuff like that because he wasn't adhering to anybody. So when you're applying this sort of thought to comics and stuff like that, like, you're closing it off at Fletcher Hanks, you know, you're closing it off at Jack Kirby, you're closing it off at Alan Moore, whoever, you know, and comics need to be able to explore beyond that, you know, and to me, like, if you're academia and everything would serve that purpose, to destroy that sort of creativity and everything, in the sense that it becomes that piece of information, that covetedness and stuff like that of information. It's not necessary for creativity, because anybody can create a comic book. Literally anyone can. If a writer creates a story and stuff like that, an artist can turn it into a comic book. An artist just draws a picture, a writer can draw put a story to it and stuff like that. There's plenty of ways to do a comic book, but if you're not going to allow it to be itself, then I think that's a bit wrong.
Right. Yeah, no, and I understand where you're coming from. And the thing about it is, like, I won't necessarily play devil's advocate because I can't, you know what I mean? I'm, because this is so early in development with the college, coveting the comics aspect. But what I say is, like, the thing about it is that you have to look at it from this perspective. They have the potential to offer scholarships, so that's more money in the industry.
True.
Publications. Raising the standard of comics on that level. So do you think because, and this is my perspective, my caveat is that comic books are in the position of where they're in the gutter now.
Right.
And that being said, it's easily exploitive because anyone can come in and be a charlatan.
Very true.
And do what they need and run with it and own the lane. They can take over comics and take it to a next level.
It's already pretty much happened, yeah. But
and academia is the perfect place for that to happen. Now to spearhead that idea.
Yeah.
Now the thing about it is that I think of that it's a double-edged sword. It's a positive and a negative because it's like someone needs to pull it out of the gutter, right?
True.
Because look at Disney. Warner Brothers owns the other one. It's like, dog. Yeah. It's deep. Like, Image is like the touting. Like, that's the shit.
That's the only comic book dumb.
And they're kicking ass. You know what I mean? So the thing about it is that, do you see... So, for example, Walking Dead does not exist. And, like, the thing about it is, like, let me be clear, because I like to give my opinion. I don't give a shit about Walking Dead. Like, I'm not a big fan of it. It's the most racist comic book ever made. Okay? I'll say that straight up. Now, I ain't going to talk about it right now. We'll talk about that later. But it's the most racist fucking comic ever. Now, the thing about it is that that's the comic book that's dominating, selling the most.
Yeah.
It owns the fucking lane of comics.
Outside of Marvel and DC.
Okay. But it's fucking with them. It's boxing. Okay? So the thing about it is that with that being said, you won't have that. If the college's academia takes a hold of comics, all you're going to have is like even a more finite perspective of Fantagraphics because that's where their starting point is.
Exactly. Because basically you have only people that are going to do comic books in this certain framework. And granted, whatever you call it, like, I don't mind anything from Fantagraphics that much.
Oh, man, I got the Fantagraphics on deck. I got them all on the fucking shelf.
There's plenty of stuff in their library that's great and stuff like that. But at the same time, to basically gentrify comic books and stuff like that is basically killing the idea of creativity and stuff like that. Because...
Okay, I'm going to cut you off, Benji.
Good,
is the creativity worth the sacrifice of mainstreaming it? Or, like, giving it that scholar standard?
Yes, because that's what scholars do, unfortunately. You're talking about people that fucking, like, but Fletcher Hanks is dead. Yeah. Very, very, very dead, died penniless.
And very macabre, too.
Yeah,
he's not, like, a flattering character.
No, but... He is someone that I know because someone has brought him out of his grave to tell me about him and stuff like that and how great he was, you know? I mean, I'm sorry.
They argue he's the first person to do color comics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, that is something that needs to be there. There has to be a room for an artist to be an artist within the scope of whatever comic books and stuff like that. Because if you turn something like comic books into... a standard and stuff, and only allow people to do certain things and stuff like that, then it's nothing anymore. It is no longer an art form, you know? It's not even entertainment, really, at that point, you know?
No, I understand completely where you're coming from.
Actually, right.
So, with the tunnel vision of the collegiates and their perspective of what a comic book is, so they will look at, okay, let's take an example. Okay, so... If we look at Spiegelman's Mouse, the reason I'm using that reference a lot, just FYI, is because everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's easy.
It's
all
over the place.
Because you're talking about Fletcher Hanks. Mm-hmm. These motherfuckers might have to look at Fletcher Hanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not gonna get out of Mouse. Period. Like, there's animations of Mouse.
Yeah, we love Mouse. Everybody loves Mouse. So with Mouse being said, and that is the academic standard. You know, the book is a tragedy. It reinforces the Holocaust. I'm not saying that as a negative way. I'm just stating the facts. It's black and white because it's about death. But it's more or less about a relationship of a guy and his father.
Exactly.
Well, Spiegelman specifically and his father, academic standard, that is going to be the standard for comics. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sorry, but I find a lot of validity in your... and I've been reading them recently. My friend got me hip to them. Benji's been done read them. We're talking about the Silvestri, Chris Claremont, X-Men stuff. Mm-hmm. That stuff right there is some of the most amazing shit I ever read. Yeah. Storm's leader. Yeah. Wolverine's a badass. Now, the thing is, because they're in tights and they look like 80s rock stars, does that disregard them as relevancy in the world of scholarship?
And I'm shaking my head no right now, by the way.
Because it doesn't. But what does that do to you guys? And, like, think about it. You know, don't be surprised if DC comes through and pulls all that shit off the market, all the back stuff, meaning, like, the essentials. You know, you guys might call us crazy. I'm not even into conspiracy, but you guys would categorize it as that. But like, they have a standard they're going to set. Yeah, they're going to make you forget all that old shit so they can give you the new. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
And at that point and stuff, there's the barrier to entry because you're talking about people that no longer know what was available and everything, where these things came from and stuff, because it becomes coveted knowledge. Yep. That becomes whatever you call it,
you gotta pay for that shit
stuff
too.
Like that. Yeah, you're. I mean, like, yeah, now we pay like $2.99 at half price books or whatever else and stuff like that. But as soon as it becomes collegiate level, then it's suddenly whatever you call it, like, oh, here are whatever you call it, like volumes 3 and 4 of whatever, like Fantastic Four and stuff like that for like $70 because it's a textbook now instead of an actual comic book for you to actually enjoy.
That's a good point you make. That's a really good point you make. I even think about that aspect of it because it can easily be exploited on that level. Because now the thing about it is that when you look at the industry, and like you said, they could put those books out of print. And think about this on a inflation level. Mm-hmm. You remove it, it's out of print. The only way you have access to it is through a college. Yep. Right? Now, there's a publications. Now, you guys may not know this, but in the art world, publications, really thorough, healthy, awesome publications derived from Yale for the arts and all that stuff. Those books cost a pretty penny. Well, actually, you could put that in any category, I bet. You know, I'm just speaking of what I know.
Yeah, I mean, the college press and stuff like that is the same thing. Once they go out of print and stuff like that, they go right away up in price and stuff.
So with that being said, imagine that with a comic. You know what I mean? Now, the thing about it is, like, my favorite comic that I own, and Benji owns it too, Miracle Man number 15. I have the trade. Benji has the issue. Graded. Very high. A lot of people haven't read Miracle Man. They may have downloaded it, read it that way. But the thing about it is that imagine that with every comic. Every good comic. Because let's say Fantagraphics is standard of good comics or amazing comics. You won't be able to read that. Nope. You know?
And I mean, the thing about it is and stuff, we already play stock market with the comic book industry and stuff like that because comic books come out that are overlooked or whatever else, and then all of a sudden, whatever you call it, they blow up, unlike Chew or something else like that, and all of a sudden you have a, whatever you call it, a big industry and everything around one comic book and stuff like that because it's like, there's all of this money and stuff like that I have to pay to just get this first issue and stuff, you know? So you put that into collegiate level and stuff like that, and what more do those issues become, you know? Right. Because they print them again and stuff like that, but it's not the same thing. And on top of that and stuff or whatever, it's because whatever it becomes a I suppose less available item and stuff like that. Because it's just like, completely. Oh, okay, like this no longer exists, period, and stuff like that, because it's whatever in school, you know? They're not even going to bother, whatever you call it, like trying to put this into a trade.
I actually think the thing about it is that there's obviously, if you've never been to an art museum, there's a difference between the original and a print. Now, the thing about comics is why they're fortunate in that way. They're future-proof because it was designed for print. Exactly. A lot of times they'll draw to scale. They'll draw it to make it fit the aesthetic of a printer because they know what it's going to, like how a printer responds. So they make it according to that. That being said, there's still something to say about the originals that you can learn from. My own personal experience, BGR3 is the writer. I'm an artist. I draw. And we both draw and write in our own respects, but out of respect for each other's lane, that's how it is. Now, the thing about that is that when you look at... I've learned... So I would buy pages of comic book artists' work off eBay. And I get 100 years of experience out of that than having the...
book in front of you.
Exactly. Now, the book is the gateway to the original.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can speak the same for writing. Yeah. If you can read the journals of the original writer, that gives you insight.
I mean, Kirby's pages are genius to me. I mean, all I see is crib notes and otherwise and stuff like that. Yep. Give me insight to everything that's going on. So
exactly,
it's all there for me.
Mm-hmm. And that being said, imagine if a college had access to had all that on lock, and you had access to none of it. Mm-hmm. That's a foreboding future.
Yeah, I mean, it's depriving people of what was already available for free, for whatever. I mean,
or cheap.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is and stuff like that, like, while I understand, like, the idea of academia in the sense that, like, you have professors that have a certain perspective or that, whatever, certain knowledge and stuff like that is only known to certain people and stuff like that wherever you happen to go, or whatever, or, like, however intensive or whatever else. But with comic books, which are distributed medium and everything, which are already, whatever you call it, within the public eye and stuff like that, for that to be something that's not only, whatever you call it, like, taken out. Well, no, I mean that's the end. That's the end all and stuff like that. Like it would be taken out of the public's hands. It would be something that becomes a completely whatever you call it, like unavailable. You know what I mean? Whereas whatever you call it, like all of the experience that it had beforehand and stuff like that, that you were able to get to from wherever you wanted to and everything, where the torrent or whatever else and stuff like that was. And I'm sorry, like that's something that shouldn't happen because everyone should be able to experience a comic book because it comes from that perspective of an everyman. Like any person, if it doesn't matter if you snub your nose at comic books and everything as children or children oriented or whatever else and stuff like that. When you're a child, you can get a comic book. You understand who the heroes are, who the villains are, what's going on and stuff like that. You get to be older and stuff like that, more sophisticated things that will appeal to you, but these things still prevail because humans respond to symbolism. They respond to narrative, like they're not going to go away. But to deprive people of that, to make comic books that were, whatever you call it, like so readily available for people to have that experience with and stuff like that, non-available, is a travesty. It's wrong. And it limits not only whatever you call it, like the a person's personal experience with that, but the artist who creates these books and stuff like that much more so. Because then, therefore, there's a standard in which they have to apply themselves to in order to actually be a comic book. When comic books are art. You are not talking about, whatever you call it, something that can be contained within a two-dimensional space or whatever else. It's something that travels. And it's not something that should ever be considered for, applying to a comic books and everything, a standard version.
And the thing about it also, and you make some really strong points, is that, I think the important things about it is where it derived from. You know what I mean? You have to remember comics are the poor man's art, and it always will be. Yeah. Now, the thing about it is that we can't say that about the creators now, but we can still say that about its beginnings. Jack Kirby, family was immigrants, came here. And the reason we reference Jack Kirby a lot is because you all know who he is. Came here. He was born here. I think he came here when he was 2. Anyway, fact check it, whatever. Besides the point. They grew up poor. Yeah. Will Eisner, same way. All these people were tenement kids in the ghetto. So its humble beginnings promote that to be relatable to the everyman.
Yeah, I mean, Alan Moore was born poor and stuff. Yeah. He was kicked out of school and stuff like that, or whatever, at like a young age, and selling drugs and otherwise and stuff like that. Like
I don't even know if he graduated high school.
Yeah, I mean, he had a life experience and stuff, and it gave him what that experience gave him and stuff like that translated to comic books. You see it in everything and stuff like that today. Like the deconstructive narrative is there, period, because of Alan Moore.
And that's his lane. And the thing about it is that what you have to recognize is that a lot of the people who... Now, actually, we're going to push this dialogue forward. I'm going to talk about the analytical perspective of collegiates. The thing about it is that the comic idea promotes fantastical, bombastic, whimsical, all these elements.
Yeah, anything goes.
Mm-hmm. And in a post 9/11 society, they have become very reality based.
Yeah, rigid, which is what we were talking about in the other podcast and everything, as far as whatever you call it, people's costumes looking like their technology as opposed to whatever you call it, just being a part of their personality.
Exactly. And so, with that being said, we can look at how that fits comfortably within collegiate standards because it's something that it's so analytical that they can point at and cite and build journals off of. Yeah. And the thing about that is that that's the barrier to entry for them. And they'll go back, they'll trace the trails all the way back, but it's them doing research. Yeah. It doesn't derive from them as a child. Now, we're not being, and like I said, some of this might come off as elitist, and it's not supposed to, because we would love to enroll in a college class that is teaching comics.
Indeed.
That would be the shit, because we would get another aspect of it. So we're fans of everything and everybody. But what you have to recognize is that where we all, including you people, everyone listening to this, where we derive from is the discovery as a kid. We didn't have the academic standard at the time. No. We didn't have the movies. We didn't have the fucking cartoons. Wolverine was from Australia at the time.
Yeah, we had really crappy video games on the NES and stuff like that.
In our imagination.
Yeah, that was it.
So now, in a society where you don't need that, are comics a dinosaur? Are we irrelevant? You know what I mean? And the thing about that is that everyone listening to this is going to say no, because it's like they don't want comics to be in that position. So, academic, is that our Jesus to save us? You know what I mean? And we already talked about that and discussed that, but that's something that we're asking this question to you guys. Is that our saving grace as a culture? Has it become esoteric now? Mm-hmm. And with that being said, where do we go? Like, this is where I think like the punk aspect comes into comics, where it's like, okay, you have that standard, no different from your music being taught at school, and then you have the antithesis of that.
Exactly, which is what most people run off of and stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, which is a beautiful position for comics to be in. So that's flipping this negative, situation to something positive, where we can see like, okay, well, they set that standard, then we have our own standard. Once again, that might give us the energy we need to be creative again instead of relaxing on our morals. You know?
Yeah, and I mean the thing about it is and stuff. It's just like when we look at whatever you call it, like comics is a history of underdogs. Like you're talking about a bunch of people that basically either beat the odds or did whatever they had to and stuff like that to do what they do and everything, to create. And basically, whatever you call it, like, I mean, if comic books do become that, as far as whatever you call it, becoming a collegiate practice in which no one can really, or whatever you call it, like enter and stuff like that, that really might jumpstart people to actually start doing their own things and stuff like that. But at the same time, though, and stuff like that, there is the other aspect of people not really knowing what a comic book does and whatever else and stuff like that. But even on that end, I mean, like, I enjoy comic books no matter what. I'll read whatever and stuff like that, and I'll get something out of it typically. But what I would like to see, though, is more creative work available. To, like, see somebody else and stuff like that do something, take comic books into another area and everything that I haven't seen before and stuff. Right. And I worry about that in the sense that most people are influenced by, like, to read comic books by the movies today, as opposed to whatever you call it, like, actually reading the books and stuff like that. And
it's kind of like the reversal of it now.
You know? And so my whole thing is and stuff, like, I mean, because I've always wanted to see the movies, but I came from the comics themselves and stuff. So when a person coming from the movies and everything, creating a comic and stuff, I've yet to necessarily, like, enter that realm. And I want to know, whatever you call it, like, how they feel and stuff like that before I can actually say, whatever you call it, like, sweet comic books are saved and everything, as opposed to, whatever you call it, like, wow, this person really likes the movies a lot. You know what I mean? Because that's, I mean, I still consider comics to be an art form, I don't think that, whatever you call it, like, it's done yet. And to see, whatever you call it, like, the collegiate universe, basically, whatever you call it, like, putting their stamp on it, worries me and everything, in the sense that, whatever you call it, like, future comic creators and everything might actually think that that's something that they have to adhere to in order to make a comic book.
Exactly.
I don't want it to be, I want it to be able to be free, where a person will see Spawn or whatever the heck, or like Detroit Murder Mysteries or whatever the heck and everything, and be like, oh, okay, I can do a comic too, as opposed to like, oh, I have no talent for that. You know?
Right, yeah.
Because this is an art form and stuff like that, in which anybody can say anything. They can interject anything that they want to, and I just feel like, whatever you call it, like if that's taken away and stuff like that, then we're going to kill the actual creativity of comic books and stuff. It shouldn't be standardized. I know I went over it before and stuff like that, but it should not be something that could be put into a box. Anybody should be able to do anything they want to.
Yeah, and like, I mean, that's the beauty of it, you know. So, and I agree. I really can't add any more to that, actually. I think that was pretty concise.
Sorry.
You know, it went a little, no, there's nothing wrong with that at all. The only thing that I'll add to it is just that, you know, as a caveat, recognize the shortcomings of this and heed the warning. Because what it's going to do is be a mental shift. Because there's going to be a separation between, it's no different from when they initiated the advertisement and promotion of the graphic novel.
Right.
There was the development of the deconstructing of comics, and they were able to market it in a way to where it sounds great. It's just like all the stars aligned.
Right.
And it's called a graphic novel. Now, a lot of people hate that term. And that's why you can recognize a old school, quote unquote, fan versus a new school,
because that's what they know.
Yeah, because they're like, they are read graphic novels, and it's like, what? Like, I read comic books.
Yeah, that's what they are.
Right, because that's where they start. But and that doesn't like disregard. I'm not going to sit there and like be mean to somebody.
Imagine it being considered literature.
Right. We'll save that one. So, the thing about it is that with comics, with people who have this idea of it being a graphic novel, you can see where they're coming from. Imagine another generation of people saying, like, only speaking to you in 12-syllable words about comics. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Now, I'm not saying there's not room for it, but you know how the academic standard promotes their agenda, no different, like I said, than a doctor or an authority or an quote-unquote expert in that position. Yeah. When the expert is actually you, because you spent more than the fucking 10,000 man hours necessary to do it,
to understand it, you know? And the thing about it is, it takes away from that perspective and stuff. Because, like, for me, I mean, I'm sorry, but, like when you're talking about like psychology and like medicine and stuff like that, you're talking about something that is a barrier to entry to me and stuff. I understand it and everything in the sense that what it does, but the intricacies and stuff like that make it so vaunted and everything for me to whatever call it, like this suture versus that suture, or like this transplant or this is transfusion, and like that stuff is just, it's too much for me to really whatever like fathom. And comic books are not that. Period. Anyone can pick up a comic book and get something out of it and stuff like that.
Even if you just look at the fucking art, you can appreciate it. I
mean, if you just turn the pages and stuff like that, you can see something in it. And it shouldn't be something that is turned into a whatever you call it, like black tie only event or whatever the heck, you know what I mean? It should be something where everyone is able to interject and see what they are going to see and stuff like that within the work, you know? I mean, if we're going to do it like that and stuff, then it should have been like that a long time ago at this rate and stuff. At this point, it is literally exploitation that's occurring.
Yeah, because it's funny that and like, I can vouch for recognizing comics in the comic industry back in, I would say, 2004. That's when I was aware of it. I'm sure it's been there actually since, a long time. You probably had the professor in the basement who was interested in comics, you know what I mean?
Didn't want to tell his friends.
Yeah, so it's like, it probably was always there, but for it to be promoted the way it is and to be recognized the way it is completely based off of the exploitation and the interest of the ravaged fan base who's seen movies, who played video games, who've been entertained by the media of it. And that has, because the thing about it is like, and let's back up a little bit.
Yeah, that's
college to us, we believe it should be free. Period. Education is free.
Yes. Period. Information is free.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
And I mean, I pay a $30 internet bill a month. That's how much my knowledge costs. But I got a library card too. I'll go there.
Yeah.
And that, so that's our stance on it. And also to further that, we both believe that this aspect of it, the college aspect, is a positive, and that it's a good idea, but recognize where it's coming in at. It's coming at a position of where comics are, not comics, but colleges are a business-oriented, for-profit, they're the charlatans of the world. Yeah. People think churches are? No. Colleges, then churches.
First and foremost.
Yeah, so because the thing about it is that culturally, a lot of people are forced to go to college and take out the loans and have to pay for it and end up with $50,000 debt. Mm-hmm. That's why people relate to the show Girls in a bizarre way. Even they market that. That's the thing about it.
Exactly. I mean, because it's part of an industry and stuff like that. You become this or whatever, and or you want to be this and everything. Therefore, you have to go through this barrier and stuff like that of entry, and then you can actually have some measure of quote-unquote success and actually
it's validation.
You can survive basically at the end of the day and stuff like that, but it's not anything. It's information being passed on and stuff like that, what our ancestors pretty much did for free for us and stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean, is no longer, whatever you call it, available to the common person. There's a barrier to money and stuff like that, and it's not worth it. I'm sorry. I understand that how necessary it is to gain information and stuff like that, to have access to it, but to actually put a price on it is wrong. It's not cool.
Agree. And the thing about it is that they'll exploit it and run into the ground from that perspective to where it becomes mundane, trite.
Yeah, I mean, Harvard and MIT and everything offer online free classes and stuff like that. Right. I don't know if they actually offer degrees yet or anything like that. You'll have to research that, I guess, guys. But, yeah, that's something that's still, whatever you call it, coveted. Yeah. And sought after and stuff like that as a form of status, pretty much.
It's a standard. It's what makes and breaks you in Western culture. So that being said, I'm comfortable with where we conclude at. How do you feel, Benji?
I'm good.
Cool. Well, hope you guys enjoyed Comics Uncut number 2. And we will see you next time for number 3.
Indeed.